Howdy y'all, I am Ice Gold, and it's October 1st again, so, it's time to make one of these videos again. So, 2 years ago, this was actually the type of video that blew my channel up, and I like to come back and revisit it every now and then. And of course the topic is going to be the PvP barrier to entry. Now, this has been, honestly, a pretty severe problem ever since Spellement's really kicked off. Like, the summer of 2022 was when the Arc 1 Spellements got added, and, I mean, of course, those were a nightmare. And, it's like, things like that, the excessive grind, all of the, like, the raid gear and whatnot, that's been a whole problem. Summer of 2022 was really when that barrier to entry in PvP, rose dramatically, because all the way up, and, in the before times, right, it used to be, you could just get yourself, like, whatever the latest world gear set was, maybe a couple of extra pieces here and there, that sort of deal, and, you could get yourself PvP ready, and that was all well and good, and then Spellements and raids came out in the same update, so that was pretty sick. So now here we kind of are, and the population of the PvP queue has, of course, dwindled significantly over time, and probably the biggest contributor to that, because there's a lot of people that still enjoy PvP. I mean, you see people like AwesomeTheSauce stream the game, stream PvP, of course, and he averages about 500 people watching him between both his platforms that he streams on. So it's like, bro, it's like the interest is there. People want to get into it, and I get DMs all the time. People are saying like, oh, and comments too that are saying like, yo, is it possible to PvP without Spellements? And I always have to break the news to them that no, it's not possible, because Spellements really just matters so much. And of course, I can kind of just show you what's going on. I subconsciously equipped this pet because I saw a wooden chest and I wanted to hit the little button to get myself some extra Spellements. That is literally why I equipped this pet. So, talking about Spellements, of course. So this is my Death Wizard. This is the deck, of course, and how many of these cards require Spellements? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of has them, but I won't count them since it kind of just buffs the damage and it's already no damage. So we're going to call this 4, 5, 6, 7, sorry, 8, 9 cards in main deck, and then, 10, if you want to count side deck. This is much easier to go get, but, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 different cards, and of course 9 being you can't just go put them in TC. It's a problem. Like, Spellements have really raised the barrier to entry more than anything else, and the main reason for it is because they're very hard to farm. The Arc 1 Spellements, honestly, not so much. The Arc 1 Spellements, like Elephant, of course, and Skeletal Pirate, that's the only two that are that are really in here that are Arc 1 Spellements. But yeah, it's like these two are mostly easy. Like you can just farm like Vosic Ashweaver in the Grand Chasm, for example, for Spirit Spellements, and of course Boris Blackrock for Elemental Spirits Spellements, and both of those guys are in Dragonspire. Very easy. Just level scale and have somebody else come farm them with you. That's kind of the main deal, but you can create teams for that. But it's all of this other stuff that is just really tough. I mean, gold key Spellements like Headless Horseman aren't really too terrible either. They do drop at an okay rate, especially Headless, assuming they buff it. This is going up on October 1st, of course, so this spell is about to come back into rotation, but I hope that they buff the drop rates on this because it was pretty bad when I farmed it. So there's that. I still don't even have it at tier 3 just because, like, it would have been a whole thing for 10 damage. So you get the idea. But it's like getting 75 Spellements And in things like Toirette's case, 115, because you don't get the spell for free. You have to get 115 Toirette Spellements in order to use this in your deck. And this is like the de facto overtime clear for a few schools. So that's awesome. But yeah, it's like these Arc 4 Spellements are horrific. Same with Grim Reader, of course. That gets included. Skeletal Dragon, to be honest with you, the Arc 2 Spellements have the worst, being, of course, Skeletal Dragon, and Avenging Fossil is the other example that I can give for Arc 2 here, just with this deck. And it's like, the Arc 2 Spellements, they are just atrocious to go get, because you can't just sit and farm like a 20k health boss over and over for these. It's like you need to set it up well, and it's like you can't just create a team for that. Like, you can actually Scald Incendiate, or like Glimpse Incendiate, whatever's really stronger on Archmagus Lorcan, but of course his drop rate is half that of Boris Blackrock, Zarathax, and Vossic Ashweaver, so that's really sick. They made them much harder to farm, but yeah, I mean, Arc 2 Spellements are bad. Arc 3 Spellements, honestly, I don't really see much use out of these for most schools. Kisma, I guess, could be good for death, but you know, there's a lot of Arc 3 Spellements that are not used. But it's these, there's other Spellements out that have this same thing going on. That, of course, I moused over Crimson Phantom earlier, but the more glaring issues are things like Monster Mash and Poison. These are what are called event Spellements. And by event, they mean Beast Moon, because that is the only way to get these outside of, you know, just buying the pack. And, I mean, there's people that don't want to buy the pack, and that's perfectly measured. That's understandable. So it's like they just won't have these. And it's like Monster Mash and Poison. For a Death Wizard to get into PvP, Death is probably the most popular school right now, and it's also the best in PvP right now. And these two cards, if you don't have these two cards, you are tossing exponentially, like, terribly, because these two cards give you so much control over auras, and countering positive auras, you have to buy the pack. Countering negative auras, you have to buy the pack. And it's like it's either that or play Beast Moon, and nobody wants to do that. So, you know, it's like these are really bad. And I've focused on Spellements for most of this because they really and truly are the worst of it. Because recently, and of course the meta setups for, like, okay, first and foremost, let's shift the conversation over to gear, because I've droned on and on about Spellements and how hard they are to obtain for too long. The bottom line with it is just make these much easier to get, and, you know, the game starts healing. That's all I really have to say about it. Just make Spellements either easier to get or drastically reduce the rate at which you need to, or drastically reduce the number that you need. So, from, like, Snack Attack, in every spell that you get for free, you need 685 Spellements, and I've already been talking about how hard Spellements are to get, so, right, so, yeah, and then, if you don't get the spell for free, you need 720, so, that's kind of the thing. Just sort of cut that as hard as you can, and maybe the game will start to heal. But now let's talk about gear. First and foremost, let us cover just the elephant in the room, of course, being raid gear. Of course, this is not part of it. This is from a pack, but I'll get to that. These boots come from the hardest content in the game. And, yeah, I mean, I've had these for a while. But I will say that raids as a whole have kind of come down in terms of where the barrier to entry is. They kind of really upped it with the Azteca raid, because obviously pieces like this are insanely strong. Hoonhouse Singularity Mail also insanely strong. But, you know, one thing that it looks like they're doing is they're moving raids down from 12 players to 8. That's what they did with the new Lemuria raid. Of course, the Lemuria raid is going to use the same I guess, like, stats, the same templates, rather. So, you know, the Lemuria raid is much more accessible to the average player. So, that's kind of what I'm getting at here, it's like the developers heard our concerns about raids being too hard to get into, and as a result, they have made them both easier to coordinate and just easier in general. Because let me tell you something about the Azteca raid. That thing is the hardest content in the game. I don't think it's getting topped anytime soon, and yeah, I mean, for 2 years, it gave the best pieces of gear for like the hats for a lot of schools, the robes for a lot of schools, the boots for every school, outside of I guess Storm and Life, which used shield pin boots, but even still, the wands for every school, even the athames and rings and amulets for some schools. I even used one from that raid on my death for the deck, so it's like, bruh. So it's like, raids for the longest time, you know, they were extremely inaccessible, they were hard to coordinate, they were hard in general, but the devs kind of hurt us on that, and I do think that that is a very, very good thing. I think that, you know, if this next raid that is going to be reusing the Dragonspire Void templates and the Nullity templates, as well as the Polaris, Unreal, and Daemonic templates, I think if the next raid reuses these, it will also probably be an 8-player raid, which is a very, very good step in the right direction. So raids, I think the devs deserve some praise on this one. They raids are still, you know, very, very hard in the end game, and they are certainly not easy by any means. Like, even the Lemuria raid has its own challenges, but going forward, like, they have a nice little precedent that they've set, in that the developers have made getting into raids easier and making the gear more accessible there. And I think that's a very good thing. And I think this is a major improvement from where we were even 1 year ago. So I think that's pretty good. And of course, you know, they're still working on all of that. And I do hope that they do eventually make the new raid that's going to reuse the Nullity and Void templates. I hope they make it 8 players. I don't see why they wouldn't at this point. They've already done it with the Lemuria raid. They may as well do it with whatever the next raid is. Maybe, I don't know, Grizzleheim or Caramel, or even, hell, even Darkmoor. You know, it's like they have options. They have a lot of options, and I think that the devs do deserve some praise. I think with this video being sort of like a checkpoint in the game's history in terms of where the PvP barrier to entry is, I think that major improvements have been made in terms of actually getting the gear. And these robes, like the brace robes, which, you know, hell, I mean, bruh. But with these robes and other pack gear, like the Wastelander hat, you can get from rematches, and, you know, you can coordinate a team for that. Of course, some of these are not easy, but there are a lot of guides on YouTube, so, you know, there is that as well. Like, these are, you can get pack gear for free now. That's a really good thing that they've done, and it's the same thing with things like the Baleful Plot Armor and the Raiment of Vernal Fury. It's like, this is the Liches and Legends Gauntlet Robe. This is best in slot for all of the Resist schools, Death included. I just don't have it. I just have not done the Gauntlet yet, but the main thing with this is, like, the pity system for the Liches and Legends Gauntlet is much better. It is kind of a slow farm, from what I hear, but at least it's consistent. So they've made getting gear more consistent, and I think that the devs really do deserve some praise for that. So pack gear is easier to obtain, raid gear is becoming easier to obtain. All in all, good. You know, it's they've really improved on that, and, you know, gear farming as a whole has gotten better at large. So realistically, I mean, it is still a lot to do, and this isn't even taking into account weaving yet, and I haven't mentioned that in the 14 minutes that I've been recording this video, but weaving, like magic weaving, it's a cool concept, but everybody needs to do it now. I mean, the whole reason I had these elephants in my deck was because of this card, which is kind of insane. So it's like, it strengthens off-schooling a lot, but it's just another thing to go out and do and farm for and complete. And the weaving labors, you know, they take a while. So it's like, the devs really did something good in making gear easier to get, but they replace that part of the barrier to entry with weaving, and I think that they need to make weaving much more streamlined and that sort of thing, and you know, have better weft yarn farming locations. Like the best weft yarn farming location right now is Rotten Rob out on Triton Avenue, and he only drops like 10 to 15 at a time, and you need 95 to craft the Pierce Jewel. So yeah, and by Pierce Jewel I mean one of these like dual school Pierce Jewels, like Death and Fire. So yeah, there's that. So it's like I said, you know, the devs largely fixed a problem to a degree and then created a new one. So that's what can you do, right? What can you do? So yeah, weaving I think is just the whole thing, and like every time the meta shifts considerably enough, it's like better weaving combos come up. So I don't know, I just hope that going forward the developers give that a little more thought. So it's like the two biggest parts of the barrier to entry, and of course pets is just always going to be there, this has been there forever, but the two biggest parts of the barrier to entry to me at the moment are Spellements, more specifically like the later Spellements that have come out, and of course magic weaving. That those two parts are now the two biggest parts of the barrier to entry. I am glad that they've made gear farming easier. It's still not in a perfect place, but it is getting there, and that really counts for a lot in my opinion. So you know, they're still putting in the work, and I'm sure it will continue to come down just sort of as time goes on. But with that being said, not really much else to say on the topic at the moment. Just, I mean, we're revisiting this topic again for like the third or fourth time in 2 years, and it's gotten better in some aspects, but worse in others. That's kind of all that I can really say about the PvP barrier to entry. So, with that being said, thank y'all for watching. I've been Ice Gold. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave like 50 comments for the algorithm. My Discord is down in the description if you want to chat with me some more. And I will see y'all later.